Good afternoon, RJ. Happy Saturday. How's your day been so far?
It has been great.
Yes, it's so good to see you. I know you had an active morning, right? You were out and about doing some painting.
I was live painting in a pop-up studio in downtown Rogers.
Oh my gosh. I love speaking with artists and creative people, but I get so intimidated by the act of like actually doing the thing. And then if you add this layer of doing it in front of people, I think that's so brave and cool. What does it feel like? How do you feel going into it? Are you excited? Are you nervous?
Well, because I'm a little bit introverted, it's a great way to initiate conversation.
Yes.
And I suddenly forget that I'm introverted, and I love talking to people about art and especially getting their interpretation and what it means to them. And people will say, "Oh, I'm not an artist. I don't ask me anything," but they have lots to offer. And I find that fascinating. And especially when we connect, which almost inevitably we can connect.
I think that's so beautiful. I've thought about a lot recently, like, the role of podcasts by organizations and how it helps me know them better. And I think this is a similar thing. Like, I could have a beautiful masterpiece by RJ on my wall, but it's so different than having that masterpiece and knowing you as a human. Like, that's so beautiful that you would put yourself out there and give people a chance to know the person and the mind behind the work.
And I do think people that's meaningful. I know that I like having a conversation with artists whose work I collect as well. So it just gives an extra layer of meaning.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm so thankful that you'll give this extra layer of meaning here too and share your story today. Without further ado, this is RJ Lawlor, non-representational painter. I'm so excited to get into what that means and how you got to this point and all the good stuff. But we'll start at the beginning, where we often do, with just learning a little bit more, RJ, if you will, about your personal background, where this art interest came from, what it was like for RJ as a kid, all the fun things.
Okay, well, I grew up in rural South Central Kansas on a farm. And I think I always say I grew up somewhere over the rainbow because it was a pretty much an idyllic childhood as far as being free to explore and roam. And yes, I had a pony.
Oh my gosh. What was
I
its
know.
name? What was its name?
Lightning.
I love it.
Mhm. And that was my a gift from my grandfather. So, there's that. And so I grew up in a family that I consider creative. They were all makers, mostly utilitarian, functional things. But somehow, even when my brothers were, maybe welding a gate, they would figure out some way to add a little flourish, the brand or something special. And so craftsmanship and creating your own and the respect and joy for that process, I think I was surrounded by that with my family.
Wow, so beautiful and so cool to from an early age be around like making and makers of all types, and to be encouraged to find, I guess, ways to add beauty to those everyday moments, like opening a fence or something. I think that's really, really special.
It was special. And then my mother was a little bit more into decorative, and then that fierce belief that I can do anything. So, she made wedding cakes, she made wedding gowns. She was a baker, she was a decorator. My sister is a decorator. So just doing it. And
Wow.
that joy it was really special to grow up with that.
Yes, and like a Jill of all trades, as they'd say, right?
Yes,
She could do a little bit of it
exactly.
all. It seems like you got exposure to a lot of beautiful like skills and resources. And so, what were you doing in that time? Were you out in the field making the fences or baking the cakes or drawing, going to school? What was that like for you?
A little bit of everything. Um, I dabbled in all of it just alongside, but When I was in school, I actually didn't have many art experiences as far as art classes, but I did in middle school and high school have an art teacher, and she was quite influential. We loved her, and I think most of all, she loved us because we were a little bit of a ragtag group. It was a small class with kids who were absolutely in love with art, and then those who were there because nobody else wanted them in their class.
Yeah.
And she treated us all the same, and there was just that deep respect for students. So she was an incredible inspiration to me.
Those pivotal like grade school moments and those teachers who are in them have such power in shaping who we become, right? I ran into my a little later in life, but my high school English teacher in the grocery store when I went home for winter break this year, who I hadn't seen in like over a decade maybe. And I just all the feelings it brings back reminds me, I guess, of these teachers' roles and how much they carry through in their influence after even the time in the classroom with the kids from all walks of life. Sounds like that was really
Exactly.
special.
And at the time, we don't maybe even recognize it.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. You can't put old heads on young shoulders, right? I feel like all the adages are coming out of me today. I don't know where they're coming from, but we'll
That's a
roll with
good
it.
one.
So you had this art teacher who kind of planted a seed. Is that when you started to think more about art, or what was that like?
Yes, and of course, through high school, I was thinking I always want to be involved with art, but I was also thinking, okay, so what's practical? How can you make a living? And I don't know that I'd ever really personally met an artist. So that wasn't even anything that entered my head. It was, how do you make a living being an artist? And so teaching was what came to mind. And so I pursued a degree in education, art education.
Wow. So you literally followed in her footstep in your teacher's footsteps,
I
right?
would like to think so.
So beautiful. Oh, if only she knew all this cool stuff you're doing now. No, that's awesome. So you went to, was it Wichita State University?
I started at Emporia State, actually, which is in South Central Kansas, and then finished at Wichita State, took a break in between. Um, and so, yes, I finished at Wichita State with a degree in art education and master's.
So cool. And so I guess did you teach right after that or what came next?
I did. I taught for 25 years I taught art
Wow.
in elementary, middle school, high school, and college. So I got to, that is my absolute, very, I guess, what would I say? I'm honored by that, to have that
Yeah.
experience of teaching all the age groups and seeing how important art can be in everyone's lives.
Yes. Was there, I don't know, certain teachers in my life I associate with different, sayings or lessons. Was there something in your course that was really special to you, or some project that you always did, or something about your teaching that really stands out right now?
Oh, I don't know. I always wanted the students to understand how passionate I was
Mm.
about art, and that it was accessible, and it should, I wanted to share that appreciation. I wanted them to fall in love, not necessarily to be little artists, although elementary kids are all artists.
Yes.
Um, we leave that as time goes on, but I I wanted them to just fall in love with the process of making art.
I love that message you said too of accessibility. I think to similarly plant the seed that if you want to be an artist, you can pursue this, or if you want to learn art, it's here for you, or resources are here for you. That means more than teaching maybe any specific practice, right? Or any specific museum trip. Like that's just It's really special. Very,
Yes.
very powerful. So you had these 20 something years of teaching, but when our paths crossed, you're doing something different, right? You are now a full-time artist and maker yourself. And how did this come to be?
Well, so when I stepped away from teaching, I really wanted to just become a student again. And it it felt like it was my time to learn, to grow, and to practice because actually teaching consumed all of my creativity and energy. And
Yeah.
I did a few things, but mostly all my energy was regarding teaching. And so eventually, when I stepped away from teaching, I just thought, this is my time. I want to take classes. And then we moved to Northwest Arkansas, which was pivotal or influential. And so, it seemed like it's a whole new world and I can do and be something different than what I've done in the past.
Yeah, it's amazing how those life moments give us a chance to reset. I studied marketing as an undergrad, and one of the most interesting like sort of insights I gleaned from those courses was that brands really look for those life moment changes too, because that's when your brand allegiances are up for grabs. So not only are you going to pivot from teacher to student, you might also pivot from Colgate to Crest. Like it's just so funny and crazy to me how something like a new life chapter, it makes it opens the whole world up for us again.
That's so true because I never even I would say I was an art teacher. I would never say I was an artist. And I
So
didn't become an artist and claim that until the last 5 years.
so amazing, and I'm so happy to know you at this point of the journey. So um artist hat now for the past 5 years, but I don't want to miss over the story of how the artist hat really started to turn on in like the sales perspective. You told me this really beautiful anecdote from downtown Bentonville, and I wondered if you'd be willing to share it today.
Oh, well, yes. So I was taking classes. Well, there were several things that just amazing people who came into my life by happenstance.
Yes.
Um, And one was I was actually standing in the parking lot being introduced to someone, and I asked her what she did, and she said, "Well, I'm promoting local artists." And I said, "Well, we need to get to know each other." And I had never called myself an artist at that point. And she said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said, "I paint and I'm a mixed media artist." And then she wanted to see my work. Well, she wanted to know whether I was active on social media and I was not, or what I was doing. And I ended up going home and painting so I could be able to show her something that I was doing.
Oh my gosh. It's amazing how quickly things come together, right? I think just even that you can remember the first moment that you articulated to the world that you were an artist is so special. And at the time, you had been painting for your home, right? This is a really
Right.
a pivot of big proportion.
No, I didn't. I had things that were hanging on my walls that I had painted, but I didn't have anything. She was looking to have a show. And so she was wanting large scale paintings. And I had to go home, or I chose to go home and produce those.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then the most exciting thing was, so at the first show, um, the first night, someone walked in and purchased one of my paintings. And
And
that
that was
launched
it.
my career.
So amazing to, I guess, also have that boost of confidence. Like, all right, this is legitimate. Like, people really are gravitating toward this thing, and now the ball's rolling. I can't imagine what it was like to be in your shoes at that moment.
It was, I hate that cliche life changing, but it really did alter my course and really I thought, wait a minute, if somebody's willing to pay a lot of money for a painting, that must mean I have something to offer.
Yes. It's I don't know why it's coming up for me right now, but like the idea of like, faking it till you make it. And then you get to hear other people's affirmations of like deep down you did know inside, like you're a kick butt artist. Like this is gonna happen. Maybe there is still some self-doubt there, but to have the world of Northwest Arkansas start to come around you and uplift your art needed to happen. And I'm so
It
glad that
was it was a significant moment, and then just all these people came into my lives, like, I was taking classes, and an older gentleman in the class who became my mentor approached me one day, and I was so flattered. He said, "Hey, kid." Kid, he called me kid. He said, "Hey, kid, when are you gonna start taking yourself seriously and putting your art out there?" Well, I was thrilled because he had been a gallery owner in his past life. And so that was a significant vote of confidence. And then it was just a series of wonderful events like that. One of the one of the biggest kickstarters was my brother-in-law and his wife hosted uh, an art show in their home in New Orleans, and
no.
they invited all their friends. So I packed up like 40 paintings in our SUV and went to New Orleans, set them up in their home, and I think I came home with 10.
That's amazing.
It was, probably the only time in my life anything like that will happen, but that was significant. Um, well, it just propelled my energy and my interest in painting.
Yes. And I don't know if people give enough credit to, continuing education. Like I think that's so it sounds like you were able to start making a lot of connections because you just put yourself out there, like you said, as a student. And so you don't have to go get another like degree even necessarily, but there's so many um I'm sure in any community, including our own, chances to meet with like-minded people or people with similar interests.
Yes, and that's the wonderful thing in Arkansas. Um, Anyone over 62 can take a class for free, and you pay the fees, but tuition is free. For those of you like yourself who are paying tuition, that's significant. And
It's
so why not take advantage of taking a class? There's so much to offer.
Yes. And so I love that we're building anticipation before we show your work. That will come shortly, but I want to keep building that anticipation and just speak to, your style and your approach to your work and whether that, changed after you were a teacher, whether it was the same in college versus now. Can you tell me a little bit about what your style is like?
Well, now it is non-representational.
Mhm.
And so I think I've always wanted to paint in that style, but in college, learning the basics, I didn't have a style, and I was not. I was so unsure of myself. And then maybe the environment where I lived would have been a little more conservative. It was my interpretation that cowboy art or representational art was the most popular and admired art. And while I admired it, I had no interest in painting like that.
Right.
So I just couldn't do that until I finally broke loose and launched my own thing.
Yes. So you mentioned there a little bit, like building your confidence or your identity as you found your style. Was that something that happened, then after teaching, or when did you come into non-representational painting?
Really, it would have been when I was the first time I took an art history class and I saw the abstract, non-representational artists, the expressionists. I knew it. I didn't want to study anything else. I was just hooked on um, the black and white paintings, the op art, pop art, all of that. interested me far more than representational art.
Yes. I love learning new words and definitions. And so non-representational art was not a phrase I was familiar with before this conversation. I could guess, with the literal definition that it means maybe art that doesn't look explicitly like anything that we see in the world. But is there more to it than that? Like, can you explain more about what it means to be creating non-representational art?
Well, that's some of that is wordsmithing. So lots of times people think can use also the word abstract,
Mhm.
but there are artists who would argue that everything is abstract, even when it represents, if you paint a vase of flowers, that's representational. But many artists would say, no, it's not. It's abstract because it's not the flowers, it's a representation of the flowers. So there's all kinds of word stories that you can go
Wow.
into. But with non representational, I think more of um, just being free of anything specific as far as subject. And for me, I like the idea of creating or referencing an experience or maybe even something more like a spiritual effect.
Yes. So I think it is interesting how you did end up at this style that maybe pulls from experiences you've had throughout your life with an appreciation for simplicity or an appreciation of things in nature. Can you speak a little bit about maybe the faith you grew up in? And I think your dad had a pretty influential role in noticing the world. And I love it was so sweet what you shared about him when we were getting to know each other.
He did. Well, so I grew up in a Mennonite home, and people immediately associate the Mennonites with a very strict um, type of dress. Not so much in the Mennonite uh, faith that I grew up in is would be considered more liberal, but the idea of simplicity, being honored, being living a peaceable life. Of course, Mennonites are known for being pacifists, um, but just that simplicity and living simply was something that I have always loved, and I still do, the quiet life. And then projecting that in my paintings, that kind of became an element. I'm also really interested in design, and that fits right in there because design is such a powerful tool to understanding our world. And so all of that kind of, I don't know if that's making sense.
Yes, definitely.
Tying in.
No, and I thank you for going there. And there were some, I love the way you use language. And when I was reading your website and getting to know you from a distance, RJ, I saw that you described design as a dynamic language. And you talked about, working with the limited palette to express ideas about the intangible, and all these big ideas. I wondered if you could speak to that dynamic language role of design a little bit.
Well, the power of it is significant. I mean, if you take a vertical line and make it horizontal, it's a completely different message.
So true.
And so that it plays a powerful role in art and or a diagonal role, a diagonal line is completely different than horizontal. And so it communicates beyond what I find words communicate. And so that's always held fascination for me.
Oh, that is so cool. And I do think, the message, the fewer words or the more succinct it is, the more it resonates, the more we remember it, all the stuff.
Uh,
And so design
That
is,
so my going back to my father, he was a man of few words for sure. He was very, very quiet.
mm,
But when he spoke, it was always so interesting. And I guess that simplicity That's what reminded me of him, but also that appreciation for nature. So I think I might have mentioned to you, I remember have the fondest memories of him getting me out of bed to go see to go outdoors to see the northern lights. Or we would be outside and he would see something in the sky like a sundog or some phenomena happening and say, notice that or appreciate that. And how that, I don't know how that works exactly in design, but it does, because there's that power of the line or that simplicity and getting at the essence of it.
Ah, it's so true, and I think that they come together so beautifully in your work and in your life story. And I think the earth is like an incredibly designed thing. It's amazing how we are all of our parts fit together and we're able to breathe and do the things. It's pretty spectacular. And the ways that you stop and notice it in your everyday moments on the lake in Northwest Arkansas around your world are very special. So I think this is a perfect segue to talk about some of those pieces that you've created. So I'll pull them up here. The first one I grabbed was from your abstract paintings called Morning Prayer. Um, I don't know, is there significant, like, what do the numbers mean next to the works? First of all,
Those are inventory numbers for me.
that's so efficient.
They are, but so it helps me with my bookkeeping. And then I just kind of like the way,
I just
not that
like
I'm a
it.
numbers person, but there's something that raises a question. It's like, what is that about?
It does. No, I love it. I think it makes the title even more substantive. But I would love to understand, where you were when this work came about, what your process was like, whatever you'd like to share.
Well, I am fortunate to live in a beautiful place. I overlook Beaver Lake, have a 180 view of this incredible body of water and the mountains around it. And we spend a lot of time on the water in summer, boating and floating and doing all the things. And this was inspired actually by the lake. Almost always the lake somehow is in my mind when I'm painting. It's just such a powerful influence on me because it's what I wake up to every day.
Mm.
And I especially like the way the reflections work on the water. Um, and so I was thinking about reflections and reflecting and gratitude and being calm and contemplative and enjoying beauty.
Yes, it is. It has a serene effect. It makes me want to be on Beaver Lake and having this experience that you get to have there. Or I'm already thinking about ways I can recreate that experience, like having this work on your wall. But
Yes.
I'm curious. So, like a morning prayer time, I imagine is very reflective, like thoughtful, quiet. Are you painting in that moment? Are you taking that thought away with you and saving it for the afternoon? Like, what is your painting kind of timeline and your idea creation timeline?
I think my inspiration comes in the morning. I get up every morning to watch the sunrise,
Wow.
and I look at the lake, and I try to be in the moment and just appreciating where I am and what I have. And so, do I paint immediately? No. I work in my sketchbook. I'm an avid sketchbook journaling artist, but it hardly ever relates to my work.
Mm.
So that's my quiet time of meditating with a pencil in my hand. Uh, and then it's later in the day that I paint in my studio. And I don't know, there's just no separation between what I observe in nature and what happens with the canvas and my paint.
Wow. Are the sketches seem like slightly different from what you're painting, right? Are they more representational or are you
They
starting to
are.
use the words, right?
I know. So they have nothing to do with my painting. It's like a separate, no, split personality. It's
Yes.
usually more like a diary, only a visual diary. And they're just little sketches of what happened the day before, what's going to happen today. But it's kind of a personal thing with me to keep my drawing skills because I do remember maybe in high school and college when people would see or do abstract work or especially non-representational, that comment, anybody could do that. Or even more so, they paint like that because they don't have drawing skills. And I,
Uh,
I don't want to go there. And it's like, no, I can draw and I have to prove it to myself every day.
oh
And
my gosh.
that I choose to paint in a different style, that's by choice, not because I can't draw. So it's
Right.
just a little personal thing I have with myself.
Yeah. I love the non-representational work though. I think there's an added layer of like brain-based art happening or something that's really really beautiful and intimate beyond looking at a literal sort of thing.
That's what my fascination is with it. And then when I speak to other people about my work. I love hearing what they have to say about it and what they see. And there's usually always a connection, but that they may not live on the lake. This morning prayer could be a whole different um, experience for them, but the essence of it is the same.
Yes. I am curious about, the materials that you choose and if those are significant to you because they're practical or because they are special in some way. Like, is this on a canvas? Is it something different?
It is canvas and acrylic, and again, limited palette, mostly black and white. Sometimes there are tones of brown or golds. And then I incorporate gold leaf into a lot of my work. And I just, I don't know what it is about. Well, not just gold leaf, sometimes other metals as well. I like the glitter it gives or the gleam it gives. And
Yes.
I also like the significance. I find something sort of spiritually enlightening about the use of gold.
So beautiful in its effect, and I agree with you that it feels very special. So thank you for sharing this one. The next one that I pulled up from your site is a mixed media, as I understand it, and called Woodland Walk. So I'd love to hear how this one came to be.
This is on wood. It's a wood panel. And so it's mixed media. I painted papers, um, cut out. There might be some printmaking in there, just a variety, some found papers. I love to do that layering, both in my painting and in the mixed media of, I think of the layering as life. We just keep building up on experiences and everything plays a role at some point and in some way. And so that's what, and then of course, this one is a little more representational in that it looks like something you might see in the woods or reminds you of something like that. Um, and I do walk every day. And so I get some inspiration when I'm out walking.
Yes, I love what you said about the layering and how that works on so many levels. It's a really beautiful perspective to take. Are your walks around the lake or are they somewhere else? What is that like for you?
No, they're in our neighborhood and it's wooded and it's beautiful, just stunning.
So stunning. No, I love this one and the materials. And you talked about some printmaking being involved. So how does that come up in this piece? I'm sort of familiar with printmaking, but not a lot.
Oh, and I now that I say that, I'm looking at it to see if I can identify anything. Lots of times I just do a little linoleum block cut,
Mm.
or some kind of material and print, or sometimes I just do a monoprint, which is to paint or print. You just get one pass at it.
Ooh, all the new things we're learning about today. So thank you for sharing it. Okay, let's see what one we have next. Summer's Illusion. Um, so also I'm seeing the numbers going down. Was like 328 more recent, and these are further back in your repertoire, or how were they timed versus each other?
Some Mostly they're chronological, but I have no, it's just bookkeeping.
Yeah.
It is, I have numbers for paintings and I have numbers for mixed media that just helps me keep track of what I'm doing. But it does go chronological for the most part.
So this
Uh,
one was earlier than the two that we've seen
a
already.
little bit,
Mm.
a little bit. And this is painted papers and found papers and embellished. It was the leaf motif is a paper that I found and embellished with gold paint. And it was a eulogy to the end of summer. I'm a summer person. And
Yes.
so it was oh, yeah. I know, I remember clearly making this in September and being, both inspired by the beauty of September and October, as well as being sad that summer was over.
Yes, it's always a bittersweet time when summer's over. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I'm thinking of this song, Summertime Sadness, right now that I remember
Yes.
playing, right? Like in college, going back to school. So I'm right there with you. And especially after the cold week we've had, I'm
Yes.
especially missing summer. Um, oh, but I love this piece too, and seeing it in conjunction with the two that we just looked at. I wonder, so you mentioned that you've been in this professional artist part of your journey for only like the past 5 years or so, right?
Yes.
Have you noticed changes in how you even approach like within the style of non-representational art, from the first year you were for full-time artist to now?
Oh, maybe a little bit. I think I'm just fiercely independent.
Mm.
I know that we're to think about branding and how that fits into marketing and so forth. But I also know myself, and I know that I want to be independent of rigid rules. So I want to do collage, I'll do collage. If I want to do painting, I'll do painting. I probably should never say never, but probably don't see myself leaving a limited color scheme,
Mhm.
but I want to do as much as I can and explore as many things as possible. So as far as style changes, not too much. I think my collages are a little more complex than my paintings,
Mhm.
but that could vary from one piece to the next. So I think I'm still in the early stages. I don't really know very much as far as stylistic changes for myself. I'm just following the path.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful one. And I think being fiercely independent is always going to keep you true to your path. So that's very, very wonderful and admirable way to approach work and life. I I'm thinking about, the a day in the life of RJ the artist. I follow a lot of YouTubers who do that as their full-time job. And I'm always like, how do you structure your day? And I feel like with an artist too, maybe I have a similar curiosity. So I know that you start your morning maybe by the lake, and then um are you very structured with like studio time, or are you more flexible with how you're feeling in the moment? I'd love to understand more about that.
If you ask My husband, he would say I'm very random. I choose to think of it as independent.
There you go. It's all in the branding, right?
Exactly. But it's not a good day if I didn't get to paint. That's not completely true. When I'm with family or friends, I'm in it. But when I have the time and when I'm at home, I will make it to my studio at some point. Um, I'm not rigid about it, but I'll be 5 or 6 hours one day and 3 or 4 the next. And, you know, no, I don't have a strict routine, but I'm committed and I have a sense of urgency. I, I'm afraid that I have more ideas than I have. I don't know if I can live long enough to continue, getting all these ideas out.
Yes. How do you keep a like an inventory of those ideas so that you can pull from them, or are you seeing something and making it right away? What is that like?
Both. I do have an inventory on the outside chance that I can't think of something to paint or create. I do have a sketchbook that I keep ideas in, but more often than not, I never get around to those. I'm rather impulsive and I'm I'm sort of seasonal oriented. And right now I've been doing a lot of white paintings. I call them white because it's tone on tone, because that's what winter feels like to me. It's just
Yes.
tone on tone. And so no lack of inspiration.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think too, having your work sort of pivot with the seasons might be a way to stay energized. Like you're entering the same room for maybe 6 hours a day, many days, but you're kind of transitioning with life around you. Maybe keeps it exciting. I don't know. I think that's really cool how you do that.
It does. And I when I was younger, I would stay up all night. I don't do that anymore, but I will work late at night. And um, I am pretty inspired by quiet. And so when it's the quietest, whether that's the afternoon or the evening, that's my painting time. And that's when the ideas just seem to flow.
Yes, as a former New Yorker or still a New Yorker in Arkansas, I can say that the quiet here is definitely top notch.
My husband says, who is also from New
Yeah,
York, says it's alarming.
it's definitely like, whoa, why did someone turn something off? Like, what's going on here that it's so quiet? No, it's very special. The first moment I come back to like my apartment here after I'm home with my family, I'm like, wait, this is eerie, but no, it's actually very peaceful.
And you can hear your heartbeat sometimes.
Yeah, that part's hard. I'm like, okay, gotta get calm so that I don't hear this. It's a very special, but then you can see the stars too, and it makes for a very inspiring backdrop. So I get how you could have so many ideas from living here and living on the lake. So now I'm getting like a little nitpicky curious, but you have this inventory of ideas. Are they an inventory of titles, or are they just like how does that work, and when does titling come in? Because I love the way that you title your works.
Thank you. Um, no, the idea comes, I start painting or, collaging, adding layers, and the title seldom comes to me, sometimes comes to me while I'm making the art, but usually afterwards, and it sounds so weird to say, it tells me what it is. But
It
that's
does.
I look at it and I just think, what experience does does that bring to me? How and I love titling my work. At first, I was a little put off by that,
Mhm.
but now I love it because it could be a stepping stone to not understanding me, but understanding for the viewer to understand themselves.
That's wild, right? How that you putting that in the world enables someone else to have that, to reap that insight.
Yeah, so summer's illusion, for example. What does that mean to you? That's fun to think about
Yes.
because you could have a completely different idea of what summer's illusion is than mine, and yet we could connect on that, or that we could connect through the art on that.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and I think that, it would be such a nice way for people to get to know each other in a setting, like, if this art was there and they could start talking about it,
Mhm.
what an amazing way to make friends quickly, right? To really build
Yes.
bonds that last. That's incredible. I love that. I'm also so on here, I kind of, the works are similar scale, but in real life, are these all similarly scaled or are they completely different sizes?
No, the collage tends to be small. They're rarely larger than, 24 by 18. They're small. The paintings are up to 48 by 60 or 48 by 48. So those are big.
Wow.
Well,
Is
big to me.
Yeah. Is there does it just sort of work out that way? Is there an intention that the paintings are much bigger than the collages?
There is, because when I'm working on collage, I get obsessed with details, and every single little square inch has significance. And I will deliberate about the placement of a small piece of paper and how it relates to everything else, um, pretty obsessively, just for the joy of it, not because of anything else other than, well, look at that. If I put it at the top, it looks like this, but if I move it around, it has a completely different meaning. So I get distracted, not distracted, but I find a lot of joy in doing that. With the paintings, I think I just have a different approach, and I'm way more less thinking about the design and more about the essence of the experience. Although design is really important. I mean, composition is always important.
Yeah, that distinction is so special. So I'm really glad that we got to go there and understand that more. Thank you. So this one is a bit of a pivot from the other works, and this is just a sampling of what I understand is a substantial COVID art assemblage. But I'm so glad that you did this and that we can talk about it here. If you would, I would love to hear more.
Well, this piece I'm really excited about, and in some ways I would say is the most significant piece that I've made to this point, simply because everybody can relate to it. Not everyone relates to the non-objective work that I do, but everyone in the world has lived through the last few years, and the experiences that we've shared. So this really did come, this is the one exception that came from my sketchbook. In the beginning of 2020, well, March of 2020, I started just recording my reactions to what was happening in the world and news events. And eventually I was concerned that I might run out of my sketchbooks. Not that I couldn't order one, but so it just evolved. I'm looking at all the cardboard collecting in the garage. I'm thinking, well, I'll never run out of art supplies because I have boxes.
Yes.
So eventually, and I'm not really even sure how this happened. I just picked up, well, I love cardboard. I love drawing on it. I like the way it seems like it's, you know, could easily be discarded. It doesn't seem precious. And that's in the beginning what I wanted to do. I don't want these little sketches to be precious because this is going to be over soon and I'll probably just throw these away. So I started recording daily my response to what was happening from March through the end of 2020. And not every single drawing. I did one every day. Not every one made the cut. So this is highly edited, but these are some of my favorite sketches. They're very simple. They're, basically just little icons from what, well, who knew about Zoom really before the pandemic? And just so many things that were in our face at that time. And it was also a way to um, approach some things with a sense of humor or to work through some of the fear as well.
Yes. And it sounds like you had a sort of routine with it of like almost daily or maybe daily making something. And I think, so often when the world feels out of control or anything feels out of control, to find something where we get to build a structure can have a calming effect. And that's really cool how you were able to turn to art during that time of uncertainty.
And everybody was complaining, well, not everybody, but it was alarming to turn on the news.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And but there was so much material. And I'm not a cartoonist, but I suddenly wished I could do cartoons. And so this was a result of that, of just every single day turning on the news. What are they going to tell me today?
Yeah.
And what is my response to it? And some of the responses were passive, and then some were I had to um, just face it with a sense of humor, and sometimes alarming.
Many times alarming for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
I also so appreciate your use of cardboard here. I think you mentioned that you are a friend of Tom Flynn's as well,
yes.
right? So it reminds me of Tom has this one work where I think he ordered a TV or a TV mount or something, and it had like 5 pounds worth of extra metal materials like nook like screws and stuff, and it became its own assemblage, like a sculpture. I think the word was like waste or something. And this just speaks on so many levels to what living through this pandemic is like, because I have never had more packages in my life. Like this is crazy. And so I felt like I had to share that connection because you're
Yeah.
both amazing.
And so why not do something creative with those pieces of cardboard that were accumulating? And then it's such a cool texture to draw on. I mean, and it seemed, like I said, there was also this, well, this is going to get thrown away. And I really hope that this never gets thrown away, because it is such a story. It's divided into 3 sections: spring, summer, and fall, and just takes us through all the experiences that we shared together.
It's so cool. I love even now just zooming into some of the details too. Like in the aggregate, it's powerful, but then in the micro parts of it, it's a whole other level of insight. I'm noticing now that the calendar is March, April, and May combined, which is how it's felt for now like 2+ years.
Right.
Yes. Is there other ones in here where you might share a story or two of like what the little box was about?
In this particular, are you looking at this particular piece?
Yeah, so
Or
any of them here, like I'm noticing the Empire State Building, not the Empire State Building, oh my gosh, the Statue of Liberty has a mask on, or like any other little details that people might glance over if you don't call them out.
well, well, there's a Statue of Liberty, and the liberty being challenged
Yeah.
by on many levels, and how we handled that. Um, the one that I'm looking at it right now is the ostrich with his head in the sand, and
Yeah.
how many days you just wanted to, no, I don't want to think about this. I don't this isn't happening. And then the other things, it seemed like everything hit us with so much force and trauma. Like I'm pretty sure we thought we would all die from murder hornets.
Right. That was a thing.
And I've honestly forgotten about that until, I look at this and, oh yeah, there was that, and our obsession, our anything, all the things that people were doing to keep busy, crossword puzzles and macrame. I took a Zoom class on how to do macrame. But then the sweet moments too, like hearing the birds sing. For some people, it was the first time that they had heard the birds really sing.
Yeah.
Um, and so those are special moments, and laughing about the toilet paper shortage. Uh, and then as summer went on, really the Black Lives Matter social issues surrounding that, it was just there wasn't any escape from that. And I found that to be powerful and poignant and important to include in this. And then, of course, all the political divisiveness and how we all manage to interpret that to our own liking. Um, it was fun to do.
Yes, I'm so glad that you did it and that we get to talk about it. And we are certainly all forever changed, and that's part of life. But we get to kind of do with that what we want, and we can do good with it. And I think this is a really good thing that you did with it. So that's awesome.
On a personal level, I'm hoping for more people to get to see this, because again, I just say it is relatable,
Yeah.
and even children can look at it and recognize and remember. uh, and I haven't found, I'm still looking for the venue for that.
Yes. So what have and that's a cool segue. I wanted to ask you, what have you done with this work so far? Where is it being shared? How is it different the way you're approaching putting this one out in the world versus maybe the other works that we looked at so far?
I'm pretty passionate about this piece because I think it's valuable. I think it documents, I think it's historic. And I did submit it to a show in Denver and was pleased to have one section, but that was actually during the year of 2020. And so packaged it up and sent it to Denver, and it was included in a show there. However, once again, it was during the pandemic. I'm not sure how many people really got to see that.
Mhm.
Um, and I've shown it here locally a couple of times. Right now, it's at the Experimental House in Rogers, and it will be on display through February. And until I find a broader audience and venue for it, uh, that's where it'll be.
Yes. So if anyone listens and has a venue in mind, they will reach out to you because this is powerful documentation of our experience in this time. I'm reading. It's not going to seem related, but there is a tie-in. I'm reading about the Cartier family right now. The jewelry company,
Mhm.
and so many people that they've made jewels for them, they donate them to the Smithsonian. Like this is and because it's a record of what life was like at that time for this group of people. And I think this in its own right is a documentation of what life is like in this time for this group of American people and global people. So um, amazing to see what this will mean even decades from now.
I agree. I vacillated back and forth when I started assembling. Well, it was just cardboard stacked upon one piece on top of the other. And then I came up with the idea of using materials that I already had. I had copper wire and a dowel rod to hang it from. Um, but, thinking, why am I doing this? To saying, no, this is important. My grandchildren will look at this and say, yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of this back and forth idea. shared experiences.
Yes, and foresight that it's going to matter. So I'm so glad that you had that foresight and that you have this work for us. Um, so I will take that off my screen. And you spoke a little bit about how that's at the Rogers Experimental House right now. That you moved to Northwest Arkansas, and that was a pivotal moment in your life. But I wondered if we could speak a little bit more about what it continues to mean for you to be an artist here versus anywhere else. We're connected because of, I feel like, this community of creatives here where everyone kind of seems to know and uplift each other. But I'd love to hear what that's been like for you.
Well, it has been an amazing experience, and I'm not sure I really understand why I think it's so unique, but I've not lived anywhere where everyone was so welcome. Well, first of all, that is the Northwest Arkansas way of being, is
Yeah.
to be friendly and say hello and use good manners and all of that. But the creative community is so powerful here and so open. That, I think, is maybe different than other places. I've often said that where I was living, or if I moved to, I don't know, if I moved to New York, I'm not sure I would say, hey, I'm here, I'm an artist, I'm making art, let's be friends.
Right.
But you can absolutely do that here. And there's so much encouragement. I love that. It's not like I know every artist in the area, but I know a lot, and we celebrate each other's successes. We pull each other up when we're discouraged, and really celebrate the work. There's a total absence of competitiveness. It's like we are all doing this. We are all moving forward in this endeavor to be creative and to share our creativity with others. And so it's just an amazing community.
Yeah.
When we have shows, we turn out for each other. I love that.
I love it too. I'm thinking right now of some different analogies. Like I've worked in marketing in different corporations on and off. And the marketing team is always kind of like you guys are not generating the dollars directly. Like we're not paying attention to you. I feel like sometimes maybe the artist scene in a city that's fully established might not be given the credit that's due for the way that it's building community. I feel like here we are growing every day in very visible ways, and the art is like fully there in the center of that growth. And that might be a very different part of it. Like, I feel like the art is so valued in this community, and local artists, especially, are so valued for what they're bringing to this area to make other people want to be here.
I agree. And it's like we're all beginning. It's such a
Yeah.
new community. And yet that's not true, because I know artists who've been established here for almost all their lives. But even they are welcoming, and oh, we're so happy that you're part of us. And I think about Zeke Taylor, who is an artist in
Yes.
Eureka Springs. You know him,
Love
and
Zeke.
he's been around for a long time. But when he does and I met, he said, Northwest Arkansas has needed a good abstract artist, and I'm so glad you're here. Like, I was so honored by somebody of his stature taking notice of me and encouraging me, and that just meant the world to me. And I could tell you dozens of stories like that.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared that one story though, because it really does paint, I think, the best picture of what it is like to be new at most anything here,
Mhm.
and want to be part of something bigger. It's a great energy.
Even I remember we do some volunteering at Crystal Bridges, and I remember at some point at Crystal Bridges, someone saying, because the museum is so new, that someone said, well, we can't say this is the way we've always done it, because we've never done it.
Yeah.
And I think that permeates throughout the entire creative community.
It really does. I'll put one final kind of analogy that people have given for this. I listen to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast sometimes, and last year they interviewed a man. I think he had been part of Rope Swing Hospitality Group at the time, and he talked about how, you know, in other places, you every time you do something new, you're adding a layer of paint to a very saturated canvas. Like there's already so much there, and kind of to what you're saying of like we've never done it before. Like this is blank for, you know, this version of Northwest Arkansas or this chapter of Northwest Arkansas. So everything that you're doing is really setting the stage of what it's to become for the next 50 or 100 years, whatever it might be. So, and I'm so glad we're both here together in this moment. So it's great. The long awaited question that we've talked about and joked about, you know, as we abstract and start to wrap up here, I really do want to understand, RJ, from your perspective, why art matters, why creativity and being in a community of creativity matters, and what keeps inspiring and motivating you to show up for this work.
You know, just the joy of it. I can't think of that's my motivation. It just brings me so much joy on so many levels. The people I get to meet, the fact that there's there's not a hesitancy between young and old, or you know, any of that, or who has lived here for the longest. There's just so joy is that's what motivates me, and I think propels my paintings.
Yeah, it's such a pure motivation and one that we all get to benefit from when you share it with the world. Have you are there any lessons you've learned along the way in this journey as teacher, as artist, as just every role that you get to play when you show up each day, that you would like to share with others as an encouragement?
I would say maybe the most important thing that I've learned is if you want to do it, just do it. Go for it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Try. And who knows where it will take you. To not be your own worst critic. Just if it brings you joy, if that's something you've always dreamed of doing, do it, because why not?
Why not? Ain't
That's not
that
that's
true?
not very profound. I wish I had wise, beautiful words.
No, I think that's one that people run away from a lot. So the more we can say it and encourage people to just try, and to, if you're worried about something, like go through what is really the worst case scenario going to be. And if you can find a way to deal with that, like keep going. Like, I think that's great.
And I think we all have those hesitations. You know, every time I started painting, it's like, well, where is this going to go? And what will I do with this? It's like, well, what's worse that can happen? It's in my basement.
Right.
But there's also the chance that it will bring someone great joy and that I will connect with somebody. But I think no matter what, I mean, it's not just being in art. Whatever you're doing, if you want to explore social work, if you want to do something, try something new, go for it. See where
Yes.
it takes you.
The I love, you know, in your story just now of like, if you make the art, like it might have the chance of changing someone else's life. The story of Jonah and the whale is one of the most important and most influential to me. With one of the takeaways, like, so if people are not familiar with it, you know, Jonah had this mission from God, right, to go preach this word to these people who didn't know who God was. And he put it off and he put it off, and he got swallowed by the whale to bring him to where he was supposed to go. When he went, like the people repented from not treating each other kindly and all this stuff. And you know, if you lean into the gifts that you have and the chance that you have to do good for people, like it truly can change the course of their lives through a painting, through a visit, through a smile behind your mask, you know, whatever it might be. So I'm so glad that that came up, and that that's how you approach your work. Is we can need all of that we can get. As we do now really come to a close, RJ, I want to ask you what you want people to leave knowing about you and about your work. And the second part of that is, what are you really looking forward to next? And that could be some tea tonight and a good movie or something big. It doesn't matter.
What do I want people to know?
To leave knowing about you and about your works. I know we've talked about it a lot, but if there was something, for you to be known by, or for people to leave thinking about RJ, about RJ's art, what should that be?
That I paint and that I paint with a sense of gratitude and joy. I feel so fortunate to be able to do what I do. And um, that would be my hope, that when people look at my paintings, they would see that reflected, the joy, the gratitude, the tranquility of, or my love of nature and being inspired by nature.
Yes.
And what am I looking forward to? Oh, whatever's coming next. I'm trying to make some things happen. And and I don't know where, how do we plan right now? But I think that I'm just anticipating being on board. I'm being ready for the next opportunity that I have. For me, that means having paintings ready, showing up,
Yes.
and being ready to go.
Ready to go. I'm so excited to be tuned in to your journey as you're ready to go and all these opportunities come about. And I'm excited to see where the COVID art assemblage goes in the world and
Yeah.
the impact that it makes. But RJ, it's been such an honor to know you and a privilege to have you share your story here. I'm so thankful and I'm so excited personally to get to put that out in the world to maybe a slightly different audience. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. It was my privilege and joy.